Dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, bonjour, good morning. This is Ken at 10. How are you? Hope you're doing well. I just thought I'd do a couple of bits today. As usual, we're talking property and the various topics that are around and about at the moment. And just one for landlords, because it keeps coming up, and I've had a number, well, my emails actually filled with inquiries, people worried about this new requirement of a band C for your EPC if you're a landlord, or worried about that. So just to quantify, at the moment they're proposals, but they do look likely to come in, and the requirement will be that your property is a band C or above if you're newly letting a property after the 31st of December 2025, which in fact is 2026, which in fact is a little bit further away than if it were at the beginning of 2025. That's one side of it. And remember, the other point there is this is for new tenancies. So you have a tenant in there existing and it rolls over. There is no requirement for you to bring that up to a C during the period of that tenancy until the 31st of December 2028, which in fact is 2029. So to get a time frame on this, we're actually talking about 2026 and 2029 really. So we do have a few years to get on top of this. I think that there'll be some significant changes between now and then to A, the way the EPCs are calculated, B, the technologies that are introduced that will help people to do it. And so finally, I think that overall, your strategy should be when a property falls vacant, think about the EPC, think about how you can improve it cheaply and economically. And if you can reach it up to that C level in a cheap way, then great. If it's going to cost a significant amount of money, then you might want to hold on, because there are reasons why these may be adjusted, because they may reassess the way that they calculate the EPCs. They've done it several times already, and you may well find that the change that you make is not relevant for the new EPC measures. And I really do think that that's so many years between now and then, technologies are going to move on. So I would hold off of doing any major investment at the moment, unless you happen to find yourself vacant, and with certain measures will help, the obvious ones, such as putting a jacket on your cylinder, putting the loft insulation to a maximum depth, double glazing, that sort of thing. I'm not suggesting you don't do any of these things, but if it involves a really major investment, one that you don't want to make right now, don't panic. That's the key message here is, you've got a lot of time. You've got until 2026 for existing tenancies. Remember, that is 2029. So, that's a good few years away now. We're talking 7 years from where we are now before you really have to worry about it. So don't let it get under your skin too much. I know a lot of landlords are worried. And I think that we may see some changes. Why do I think we'll see some changes? Well, number one, the government are starting to see that by landlords being made to do certain things, jump through hoops, they are walking away from the sector. This, together with the new Section 21 changes and the Section 24 tax changes, mean that landlords have not been entering the sector in the volumes that are needed in order to quench the demand that's out there. And because rents have risen so much, existing tenants are not moving out, they're staying put. And because they're staying put, there's no new supply. Therefore, the new tenants coming in, particularly in our case to London, are finding it really, really difficult to find accommodation. And so when they do, the laws of supply and demand mean that the price of that accommodation is significantly higher. We're talking about massively higher than it was last year. There really has been a huge jump in rental prices. And so there is not enough accommodation. The government has no real plan. Govan is levelling up scheme. I mean, I don't see it, but let's see what happens. But if you look at the number of houses that are being built and the number of specialists in the sector, in the buy-to-rent sector, there's the build-to-rent sector rather, there just aren't enough properties coming through. They say buy land, they're not making anymore. Well, there is a truth to this, especially in London, where we've got such a popular place. It's a small island. We're one of the best cities, in my belief, the best city in the world. And from that point of view, people will always want to be here. Yes, the pandemic was an exception, and that quelled prices for a while. Now we're seeing the upside of that as people now are coming back. The exodus away from London has finished. People are coming back in, and they're wanting to work, they're wanting to live, and why wouldn't you? And in the process, the demand for property here in London has gone through the roof, both for sales and for rentals. So if you're thinking about making changes to your EPC, my advice is hold fire, because I think there may be some change. I think the government may be forced to bring down, either in one of two ways, that you might find that the measures required to get up to a C are dumbed down. In other words, to get to a C is easier. That's one thing that may happen in the next few years. And the other thing that will definitely happen is the way technology is moving, and with energy prices as they are, everybody's moving in this space to innovate, to create new technologies which will create cost savings, and those cost savings could be passed on via the EPC. So don't panic too much. I think that there'll be more solutions coming as we get closer to that point. And remember how long you've got. Many people would have you believe it's 2025. If you've got existing tenants, it's not. It's late 2028, or in fact 2029. So there we are. That's just a bit on the EPCs. I hope that's helpful for you if you're a landlord. By the way, if you've got a property you want advice on it for rental, that's what we do. So do come and see us, or give us a call, drop us an email. We'll be happy to help you. Mortgages are now 33% of people's monthly outgoings. That's a huge percentage, and it just goes to show how prices have moved on, and especially with the interest rate rises, this is a pressure. Do I think this will tip the market over the edge so we end up in another recession in terms of the general economy? That's possible. In terms of the property market, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is all about what happened in 2007, 2009, when the banks tightened up their criterion and made people get larger deposits and jump through more hoops to make sure affordability was there with stress testing. Since then, most people that have mortgages, although they're not happy about the price rises, can afford to make those payments without the fear of repossessions. And repossessions now are making up a very small part of the UK property market, so that even if they doubled, the impact wouldn't be significant on the property market. The most likely thing second half of this year is a slowdown, and we're already seeing this. People that are not sure about the market are just deciding to stay put and hold fire. Stamp duty, lots of talk around stamp duty at the moment and reforms. We would like to see that. I always wonder whether they'll actually do it. Most of the time it's a political soundbite, and many people are talking about the fact that, it's not fair. It's not a fair tax. It never has really been a particularly fair tax, but it is the easiest tax in the world to collect. The government just wait for the receipts to roll in from the solicitors, just funding it directly. So there's nothing for them to do. So there's no doubt that it's not going to end. Whether they change it, I don't know. I mean, there's talk about a property tax where we'd all pay an annual fee per property that we own, depending on its value. But then what about pensioners? How are they supposed to cope if they happen to find themselves having worked all their life in a really expensive property and are now on a very small salary? So that wouldn't seem equitable either. So there may be some changes to stamp duty. I certainly hope there are. I mean, we've seen some which have incentivized first-time buyers a little bit more. I'd like to see more help for first-time buyers, particularly because, let's face it, if you're on the ladder, then you have equity. At least you have the luxury of some money in the bank, so to speak. The first-time buyers don't have this luxury. So anything that can help the first-time buyers get into the market, I think, is the most important thing. And they're talking also about pensioners and perhaps relieving pensioners from stamp duty to allow them to move on, so that we free up some of those larger properties where the pensioners are just saying, actually, by the time I've done the move, is it financially worth it with stamp duty and everything else? Cowboy landlords is the last thing I wanted to say. Is there's a lot of talk today about cowboy landlords. And I can honestly say, in 30 years of doing this, I've only met about a dozen landlords that I really didn't want to work with, because they didn't see it as their responsibility to make sure that properties were safe, clean, and look after their tenants in a sensible and professional way. There are landlords that want to cut corners, of course, but most of those now are not in the business. They cashed in, because when you let a property now, there is a serious investment to be made, especially in terms of safety. You need the EICR, you need the gas safety, you need to make sure everything is passing the regulatory requirements. So cowboy landlords is just a term that frustrates me, because there's a lot of vilification of landlords, because people feel like they're making a lot of money because rents have gone up. Yes, they are making more money because rents have gone up, but their interest rates have gone up too, so their costs have gone up too. So the difference there has actually impacted them too. So just in order to stay still, they have to increase rents because their mortgage rates have gone up. And we're seeing that across the board, and that's having a knock-on effect on tenants. And I know this can provoke anger, but I have to say that in my experience, most landlords are quite reasonable with those rises. And in fact, if there's a problem with many landlords, a little bit too kind in my experience. So quite often we find that we're seeing a property that hasn't had a rent increase for a long period of time, and then the landlord comes along and says, all right, we'll get a rent increase now. And there's a huge difference in where the rent is and where they want to put it. And this can cause conflict between landlord and tenant. Better to make smaller increases more regularly than very large increases at set points in time. So apart from that, I hope you're well. It's kind of overcast and cold here. I'm looking forward to the weekend particularly. I always say it's always good to have something to look forward. What are you looking forward to? I'm always looking forward to certain things in my life. I've got a holiday coming, so I'm looking forward to getting out to Spain, to our favourite place, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. But also, I'm looking forward to this weekend because I'm taking a wife to see the new movie Top Gun. Now, when my wife and I met, this is how old we are. The first movie we ever went to see was Top Gun, and we came out of there and went, "Wow, this is incredible!" And now we're going back to the IMAX to see it in London, and the new Top Gun. And if it's anywhere near as good as the original, we're both excited to see it. It would just be nice to be in town and enjoying what this great city has to offer. So I hope you have a fantastic day. If you want to talk property, that's what we do. Give us a call. Thanks for watching. I hope you're well. Look after yourselves, and if you can, your family and friends. Ciao.